G'day, Sarah.
Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, good.
Good. Thanks for coming in. Sounds like you've got an interesting vintage coming up. You just told me about your assistant winemaker. What's happened?
Yeah, had another staff party with and broke her foot. So
And vintage starts when?
in about 10 days.
So if there's any assistant winemakers, any young winemakers out there looking for some work, to get in touch.
Yes, call me. Yeah, it's the nature of her business. You know, the humans are unpredictable just as much as the weather is. So
I reckon you've had one of the most kind of unpredictable wine journeys that I know of. Like, you come from such a different background that has no, wine education or a wine family. Like, why do you make wine? Why are you here?
Yeah, Jesus. Well, that's a long answer. I'll make it shorter. Look, like everyone else, I had this moment where I was interviewing a producer in the family of 12 in New Zealand, and I remember just feeling this really tight feeling in my throat. And we were about to go to the South Pacific Islands, and I was making really good money, and it was a really good gig. And I remember just an overwhelming feeling of envy. And I asked, hey, like, how do I get into this? I know I'm wearing Karen Walker and hunter boots that I've never seen a day's of hard work, but how do I get into this? And they said, you should try the WESIT program. Went and looked into it. I was like, no, I don't want to learn about it. I want to make it. And from there on, I just heard about harvest, like intern positions. And I sent out resumes to handwritten letters to like 300 people from Chile to back home to America, because I knew that's when the season was coming, and didn't really get any responses except one yes, which was in Paso Robles for the Hearst family.
Wow.
And they said, if you could do Survivor, you could do Vintage. And I said, I can't wait to take that off my resume. And from there on, I was just burning for it. Like, you could not stop me. I never have a plan B when I love something and want something so bad.
And it's taken you like all over the world, right?
Yeah.
You made wine everywhere.
Yeah, Germany, France. My mentor Pierre, who was just here last year doing vintage with me from Domaine de Vissou or Domaine de Chermetz. I'm pretty much like the way it used to happen. Apprentice taught kids humans are my college. If you took me to a university and made me flat learn, I probably would not be as far as I am. But if you gave me a person who was inspiring and my passion was on fire every day, I would give my life to that, and I devoted it to that cause. And so I did like 6 countries and I think 25 vintages in under 7 years before I started my own brand. I just chased the sun. Did partial vintages all over in Australia as well, and New Zealand, and the States. But
I think wine is so much like that, though, that you learn on the job. And I mean, I've not made wine, but even just being in any part of this industry, you learn so much more from talking to the people and the producers, and from visiting the sites and experiencing it than you do from a textbook. Like, whenever people come to me and say, I want to learn more about wine, what do you recommend? Is there a course I should do? And I did WESIT and all that, but I'm like, no, don't bother. Just go to every wine fair you can, go to every free tasting you can, go visit every region you can, and just immerse yourself in it, and then you catch the bug.
Yeah, I think that the bug caught me first, but I think that, my first vintage here was at Chandon, and that's how I met my husband. But it wasn't the most riveting vintage. I learned how to use equipment. However, that did teach me that I needed an actual pulse and a person with passion to drive that, and that I only wanted to be the only one in the winery to learn all the jobs, because I wanted to speed it up. And some of these vintages, you don't get everything you all the lessons that you want out of them. But for me, they really built my career. But it's the humans that I really connected with that are still in my life today, that are really these kind of driving forces when I go to approach how I make my wine. I don't ever make wines the way they taught me and how they do things, but I come from that understanding and that qualitative calibration. And yes, people for me, I'm a kinesthetic learner. I'm self-diagnosed of dyslexia. It's pretty actually, it's 100% probably for sure. But, and so I just learned how to navigate this path in my own way. But yeah, I do think that even just talking to anyone who's intrigued about a bottle of wine, I could do this for hours. And that's why people come to our house. If you're not in wine, you're probably really bored, because Evan and I forget that we do it all the time because we love what we do.
And so your place, you mentioned your house and your kind of zigzaggy winemaking journey is taking you to the surf coast there in Victoria. So your place in Torquay there, where the winery is, and the vineyard that you're looking after in Janjuk. So this is where this wine comes from.
Yeah,
so Semillon, just your classic Victorian, Geelong region Semillon. But it's an amazing wine. So tell us, I guess, a little bit about what took you to Torquay and the vineyard, the special vineyard there, and this wine, and I guess how that maybe encapsulates your like winemaking philosophy as well.
Well, I'm from San Diego, California originally, so you put me near an ocean and I feel like I'm at home. I was brought down on my one day off from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., 6 days a week from Shandon to meet Evan. And we met in our living room. It wasn't love at first sight. He chased me to another 3 countries. And I just told him I wasn't slowing down for a guy. So if this was a thing, he'd have to keep coming along. And now we've been married for 10 years. So he had a house in Torquay. He had a restaurant before that he had sold, and he had a house there. And so when we started dating, I said I would really, if I was to live here, I would stay in Torquay because I like to be by the ocean. But I'm a sucker for soils. So limestone, sandstone, fossilized limestones, like near seabeds, salinity, like those. When I look at those soils, I know exactly what varieties I want to work with. Semillon was definitely not in the wheelhouse. Yeah. However, there was this vineyard that was being abandoned that was planted the same year I was born, 1985.
Oh, and me too.
It's a good age. I still feel young.
Great vintage.
Yeah, exactly. Very expensive vintage. And Mark Walpole and Evan came upon it, and they walked up to them, and I was in Fleury, and they said, "Hey, what are you doing with this vineyard?" And he said, "Oh, I'm still selling this part of the vineyard. I'd let go of the other part. It's 2 hectares of Semillon, WTF, like why?" And Mark just said, "I reckon we should push Sierra in there and teach her in there."
What a legend Mark is.
I said no. Originally, I was like, look, I've been able to pull off winemaking without a degree. I'm pretty sure you can't grow stuff without one. And Mark said, look, I'll be there for you all the time. And I was like, look, I can't be an imposter anymore in my life. Like, it's too overwhelming. And here we are. So I feel like, yeah, it's good for me. I was just getting comfortable in the way that I express my wines and how I make them. And I think that this has just pushed me all the way back down to the back of the line, which has made my life a lot longer. Like, I love being challenged. But so yeah, we got onto the property. I started making the Semillon. The man on the vineyard was still growing it for 2 years. He was basically fermenting jalapenos. That was pretty upsetting. I couldn't wine make it out, and so I went to Mark and I said, "Is there a way we could grow this to like respirate?" Like, I was just thinking about it like breathing. Like, this whole vineyard, the canopies were like that. And I was like, well, no wonder it's so green. Maybe we need to open it up. And Mark's like, yes, you do. So we spur pruned it, opened up the canopy. And this is the first vintage, 23, that Evan and I farmed it ourselves. I wrote spray programs with the help of Mark, but now I can write my own. And always with organic practices in mind. And just won't cut off my nose in spite of my face if something goes wrong. And yes, this is barrel fermented, full malolactic. The TA is still 8, naturally, beautiful salinity.
I mean, that's amazing to consider this is a barrel fermented, full malolactic Semillon. If you think about, say, barrel fermented full malo Semillons from the Barossa Valley, from some of those old vines, they look at these really big textural golden wines. The acidity and salinity in this is amazing. It's got that, Hunter Valley-esque acidity, but a different flavour profile. And some of those kind of grassy notes you get from Semillon as well. Yeah,
it's still undeniably there. I think that, like, the maritime influence, we always get cool nights, then there's always a break, no matter how hot the day is. But in 23 was particularly a cool vintage for us. So I think the acid reflects that in all the wines of 23 and 22. I will look forward to a little bit more ripening. I actually don't mind in my whites if there's like more unctuous texture. If I see a razor blade spine of acidity, I always then work around that.
Yeah.
As long as I have, structure.
Yeah.
And so I'll push harder on a wine when it's more skeletal in certain vintages and work it a bit more, but only in my whites. And I'll pull back when I see that there's less of that and it's a bit of a riper vintage. So it's just adapting yourself to that. But I think Semillon always lends itself to high acid. and always has a retained high acidity, and that's why they live forever.
Yeah. I think this wine would age beautifully.
Yeah.
Acidity, that's really one for the acid heads. But as you say, there's texture and flavour there as well. We'll move on to the to a red Sierra, but I think something that is amazing about your range of wines, for those that know your wines, is there's things from everywhere. You know, it's not like you're like in one region.
No.
And this wine is one you've done for a long time now. This is the Alexia Grenache from the Small Fry Vineyard in the Barossa Valley.
Yeah.
Love this wine.
And just to add, we've grafted over half of that vineyard to Gamay and Riesling. And the Semillon's called Lessons, because it's always giving me lessons. And the Riesling is called Knowing, and this Gamay is called Love, because for the love of Gamay, I put it there. For the knowing that Riesling on limestone is perfect. And Semillon, because I'm still in perpetual lessons. And that's this vintage, we will get a crop of all three, which is really, really exciting. It's taken a long time. But Grenache, working with Alex Head for a little bit in 2013, I walked up to Marco Cirillo's vineyard and I saw what looked like a baby Christmas tree that was a Grenache vine, and I tasted this big berry and looked down at this like bright white sand, and I ate it and I said, oh my God, this is actually Pinot. What's going on here? Why are these people making Shiraz with Mourvedre added to it? Why, and so I just called Evan and I said, my husband, I said, look, I need to make Grenache from the Barossa. And he said, could you pick a place closer? And I said, no, I reckon it only happens right here on white sand. So I was in search of a centennial vineyard on white sand, at least over 100 years, because some vines, it's a great word, old vine, but some vines really, really, really give more when they're older, and some are depleted. And it's such a buzzword, but it actually, has to be right for the variety, and I believe in Grenache it is.
Well, Marco, you mentioned Marco. He's got a great line. He said years ago to us was that these wines aren't these old vine wines aren't good because they're old. They're old because they're good. And he's saying the fact that these vineyards haven't been ripped up and have managed to produce great wines for 80 years, 100 years, 150 years, is because they're in great sites and they're just great vineyards. And so if you are to make wine from them now, the results are extraordinary. Yeah,
and they're self-calibrating. Like, this is my most consistent wine. So, now, since 2017, I've been working with Wayne. I first worked with the Sharkey's family, the Neldner family, and Hetty was a big part of helping me purchase that fruit and penetrating Barossa, because it's a really, really, really clicky area. And then in 17, Hetty introduced me to Wayne, and I've been making wines off that vineyard ever since, and I've been so happy. Like, this is kind of fruit that's a gift. I mean, that's a month on skins. Yeah. I pick 13.5, 13.8. It's 12 months to 11.5 months in neutral large format oak on lees, and it's still haunting and beautiful. And it's what I love about Grenache is my time in Beaujolais over the course of 10 years with Pierre. I think I've always just loved red varieties that are haunting and a bit linear and beautiful and fragile. And joyous, but that express soil profiles so instantaneously. And Grenache really does that. You stick it on clay, because I've made from a site next door that's on clay. It becomes dense and ferrous and, blood and bone-like, and you leave it on, sand like this, and it becomes silty and transparent, almost like Nebbiolo and Canubi, And I love that. It's almost like capturing a bit godlike things, And this fruit is, no one can have that. It's like this. There's few vineyards in the world that can do something like that. So it's actually getting to have a piece of history, but also, like, if I were to try to make that wine, that's exactly what I would try to make. So the fact that I do logistically, I'm 4,000 kilometers to try to go to all these sites is really, I'm just doing the winemaking that way.
What's it like for you during? Firstly, I fully agree about Grenache, and I'm in love with the variety to it and this style. It's light and ethereal and just beautiful. But the travelling you must do over the year and over a vintage when you're making wines from the Barossa Valley, from Geelong, from other parts of Victoria, from New Zealand. Like, how do you go? You've got a young daughter. That must be full on to do that much travelling.
Yeah, it's why we only have one daughter. But
I remember your story from the vintage after she was 16, born.
That's There's a will, there's a way. I've now gotten to a really good rhythm where Evan got his heavy and he trucks the fruit, and we know when to call to get, the trucks on time. I have incredible help with freight in the Barossa. They drop my bins and go and get me bins from Shep in Adelaide and drop it, and they're vital to the business. Just like all people are a part of this, and everyone collectively helps and works together. And I've now got that after 10 vintages. This will be my 9th or 10th. I've got that down pat. It's logistics. You just have to, if you want to stretch yourself like that, the logistics are what you have to like really, really, get down. And it's fun. I mean, I feel like, a lot of Ks, but Aussies love road trips. I love road trips. You just, you kind of prepare yourself mentally. That's how you're going to be stretched. I think it's been great the last 2 years because I could take each vineyard down one by one, and that's why the vintages were very long. This year, I feel like it's all going to come into one head. I've been there before, and I can do it again. And yeah, it is a little bit wacky. And the fact that I go to New Zealand, yes, and now make Waitaki Riesling, but it's harvested in May, so I'm well and truly done by the end of April, even with Nebbiolo. Yeah, I'm a sight seeker. I will go to the end of the earth if I know that I have a calling and a purpose inside, something to say through that grape.
I reckon that's an awesome segue into the last wine, because I think what's unique about another unique thing about what you do, Sierra, but it's
rinse.
Thanks. You speak about having these callings towards these vineyards and varieties, and wines that I guess capture you. So this is the first time I've tried this wine from you.
Yeah.
This amazing Riesling from Otago. So what is
North
it
Otago.
from North Otago? So what is it that drew you here? But I guess just in general, even to Fleury, to to the Barossa, to other places, like what are you looking for in these wines? What is the idea?
I think for me, with Riesling is my number one grape. Like if you told me I could only make one variety and only drink it, it would be Riesling, because there's so many different wines you could make through Riesling. But I think there's a combination. There's a combination of paying attention to the signals of the universe, and I think we all get them. And there's a combination of submitting yourself to it. So, I mean, if I've heard something loud enough, like Waitaki was, New Zealand is the place that made me want to become a winemaker. And it always made me sad that I didn't really want to make wine there. And so going there and selling wines and finding Waitaki Valley through the glass, which is why the other wine's called Siren, but made me feel like, it's just been waiting till I was ready. And the electricity of the UNESCO limestone and the energy of this area and the very tiny amount of vineyards. I think what I've been chasing is I don't ever want to make German Riesling because I know I can't, but I want to have the power that I've seen in those wines. I want to find it here, and I will lift every rock. I will drive to the end of the earth, literally, to find it. And I figured out, because of the gift of Waitaki Valley, that it's in a growing season. If Riesling is growing and ripening over a very long piece of time, it is like an onion. It builds a really dense amount of flavor profiles like a red wine. But Riesling here sometimes are very, normal growing seasons with very short ripening seasons, and we get it off if we want retained natural acidity, which I do because I don't add acid. So you can see that there's the piercing acidity in that wine. There's 173 grams of it. It's like fully botryticized and so clean, but there's dimension and depth. And that is something that I could see in $4 grocery store wine in Germany. And I used to think, man, the power in this cheap wine, it's gone out the back of my head. It probably bangs around the universe for 8 years and finds a black hole. And I guess I'm always searching for that. And when it found me, I was prepared to just jump straight in, because my aim as a producer is to make things that when I pour a glass, sometimes I forget I made them because I'm enjoying them so much at the level that I enjoy, like the regal greatest wines of the world. And if I can be a part of that in the new world and bringing that forward and making us look like serious players, I feel worthy to be here. So
that's amazing. And I think that's what's so beautiful about these wines, is they're almost like moments in time, or they're all like paintings, these individual characters, time capsules. They don't. There's a philosophy, an overarching philosophy that you have to how you like to make your wines, but these are all so individual, and it's so exciting to follow the journey, because every time we see you, there's just totally new and interesting things. It's not just here's my next vintage, and we trialed a slightly different technique this year, or the vintage did this. Like there's that, but then there's also these brand new expressions And it's so exciting to watch. And this is just like so delicious, this Riesling.
Thank you. Yeah, it was this last thing I'll say about this is that, I have this argument with Evan sometimes about Burgundy. He's got some Burgundy in his cellar. His wife doesn't like drinking it. He looks at me every night, whether it's winter or summer, and he's like, oh, what should we drink? Riesling. All right, fine, I'll go get the Riesling. And it's not that I'm hating on Burgundy. It's that what I've realized about Burgundy or places where, they're essentially like, not fighting anymore or not chasing something or not trying to learn something. And I'm not saying all of the producers. I'm just saying there's now a monetized value to these wines that they're almost just it's like printing money. And sometimes I can taste that in those wines that they're bored or they're not fighting anymore. And I think why I do what I do and constantly make or chase all of these crazy, wines from everywhere is I want to still taste like in my wines, I'm still fighting. And when I see those in other people's wines around the world, they're inspiring wines and they're more dimensional for that. And I think that I'll never stop doing that because that's what I search for in other people's wines.
Well, you're going to have fun fighting through a thick and fast vintage without your assistant winemaker.
We'll get there.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sierra. We love these wines. There's never much made of them, obviously. They're all very much handcrafted and they come and go quickly. So for anyone that wants to try these wines, get onto them quickly. But no, lovely to chat to you, mate. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.